Are you ready?
Let's go.
Now circling in the neutral zone.
Here's the pitch on the way. 36 yards for the win.
This.
Here comes a big chance. The shot
is
this the dagger?
The neutral zone.
Home run. Good.
This is as good as it gets.
The Neutral Zone is brought to you by the Ontario Para Network. Follow them online at onpara.ca.
Now, here's your host, two-time Paralympian, Brock Richardson.
What's going on? It's time for another edition of The Neutral Zone. I am indeed your host, Brock Richardson. Coming up on today's program, I recently spoke with Lance Cryderman, who is coming off of a national championship win. He's, of course, a Canadian boccia athlete, and he's going to tell me all about it. It was recently held in Ottawa. We had a great chat. It was good to talk to a person who used to beat the pants off me for the most part. So you'll get a taste of that in a little while. Plus, we're going to have a discussion on the interview that we had last week with Katie Mitchell. That had a lot of things we could tug on. We just didn't have enough time last week and so on. So as per usual for us, we don't have a lot of time. And if we get to it, we'll talk a little bit about the NFL opening weekend in playoffs. So all that and who knows what else is coming up. What I can tell you though is the headlines are coming at you right now.
Neutral Zone headlines.
Ontario Para Network is pleased to announce that Jesse McNally has joined our On Para team as the new On Para wheelchair basketball men's coach. Tammy quotes, "With a wealth of experience and an undeniable passion for the game, Jesse is ready to take our team to new heights." We welcome Jesse, and I have to say from experience playing with this guy, he is, I would call him a globetrotter of wheelchair basketball. The tricks and moves that he can do in a wheelchair is mind-blowing. So to have him in a coaching role and here at Ontario Para Network is exciting. And we look forward to Nationals being hosted right here in Ontario in 2025.
Fantastic. The NHL has announced that the Florida Panthers will face the New York Rangers in the 2026 Winter Classic on January the 2nd of 2026 at Lone Depot Park in Miami. Now, if any of you are like me, your first question is, ice in Miami? How are we going to do that? It will be interesting to see, but that is what the NHL has recently announced.
Hence why I put it in the headlines, because I thought the same thing when I saw that it was in Miami, and I got a response on social media that said, "Really? Miami?" from somebody who lives in the States. So I don't get it. But I wish the NHL nothing but success with that classic, and I hope we're skating on ice and not in puddles. We congratulate Team Canada for winning the U18 World Hockey Championship for the women. They beat the United States 3-0 in a thrilling final. Again, we congratulate the women because they showed those under 20 men how to win the gold medal this year. So congratulations to those girls who took on the world in Finland. So we send them nothing but love.
Brock is still not bitter about the World Junior Hockey Championship.
I knew there was going to be a comment because I just felt it coming. Those are your headlines for this week. If you want to get a hold of us on social, here's how you can do that.
And welcome back to the Neutral Zone broadcast booth.
Play ball!
We're set to get this ball game underway. The first pitch is brought to you by Brock Richardson's X account at Neutral Zone BR.
Strike!
Pitch and a strike. Hey, gang, why not strike up a chat with Claire Buchanan from the Neutral Zone? Find her on X at Neutral Zone CB. There's a swing of the chopper out to second base, right at Claire as she picks up the ball, throws it over to the first base for a routine play.
Out!
And fans, there's nothing routine about connecting with Cam and Josh from the Neutral Zone at Neutral Zone Cam J and at J Watson 200. And the Neutral Zone is brought to you by the Ontario Para Network. Connect with them at ON Para Network. Follow them online at onpara.ca. Now that's a winning combination.
Joining me now is a friend, a competitor, a brother, which we'll get into in a few minutes, but it's Lance Cryderman, who recently came off of National Championships, which is held in Ottawa, Ontario. He won a gold medal individually. Lance, thanks so much for doing this with me. I greatly appreciate it.
No problem, Brock. Always a pleasure.
Let's start with the fact that the 2024 National Championships were held in Ottawa, Ontario. Can you tell us what it's like competing at home in Ontario?
Well, I gotta tell you, it's always fun playing in your home province. There's a lot more family and friends out there watching the games, and people who maybe haven't had the chance to see boccia very much. It's awesome to actually get the opportunity to play in Ontario. And I think this year we really showed that Team Ontario is a force to be reckoned with, but we'll get into that a little bit later.
Yes, Ontario brought its largest team ever to the championships. In total, there were 8 medals, including 5 individual and 3 in team and pairs. Can you tell me, in regards to Ontario specifically, what that means for the growth of the Ontario Bocce program?
Well, you know what? The bottom line is that we need the game to continue. And in order to do that, we have to continually develop new athletes. That's how this works. So it's incredibly important to see this game continue. And I think that Ontario has shown great potential in continuing to bring the game to people who didn't know it even existed. We have, one of the BC1s that was actually on the team with us is returning to the game after a couple of years, just like me, and she won a bronze medal. So, I mean, that's incredible, for somebody to come to a national championships after years away and to win a bronze medal like that. She's going to be a force in the game for a long time if she wants to continue on. And I'm just very excited for that.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring up Lisa because she wasn't a BC1 when she was in the game in her first stint, and she was part of the open division, if memory serves me correctly. And just due to, unfortunately, regression of her disability, she has fallen into the BC1 category, which obviously serves her better, as you point out. And I mean, I was originally a BC2 when I first got onto the scene, and I got really upset when I came to the 2006 nationals and came out of the classification room, and I told everybody I'm a BC1, and I was really upset because all I ever knew was BC2, and that's how I made this provincial team that year. And then I made Team Canada, and so the doors can be left open for you when things happen in your life, and your disability does what it does. And so I am also very proud of Lisa. And as we're doing this live on the spot, I'm thinking Lisa'd be a good person to bring on the program if she'd be so inclined.
Would be.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you returned to the sport for your second stint in 2018, and you had 6 years. And so in that 6-year span, you have made 6 finals. 3 of those you came second, and 3 of those you came first. What did you learn from the first 3 finals where you finished second that you then have carried over into the next 3 and you've won the championship?
So I think what I've learned in the 3 defeats when I first came back to the sport is that this game is a game literally of millimeters, man. And things can change within a split second with one really solid shot, as you know, Brock. So I really developed an understanding of, you can be throwing as well as you possibly can, but if your opponent has that one shot, sometimes there's not much we can do. And I just said to myself, after the first defeat in Newfoundland, I said, well, you know, this is what it is, and we're going to learn from this, and we're going to come back stronger. And each year, things did get better and stronger, and I felt like I was executing better every single year because I understood more. I was also dealing with the pressure of that game a lot better as things went on. And if you look at the final this year, um, I was in control of the game by the third end. I was up 10-0. So, it just shows that over that time span, I was able to really understand how to take control of the match and how to really keep the momentum in my favor.
Yeah, and the opponent you played is from British Columbia, and he's been in the sport as long as I can remember, even when I got on the scene in 2006, roughly, and that's Hanif Mauji, and he is probably the epitome of consistent in Canada. He just knows how to play bocce, and he knows how to be consistent, and he keeps his game very simple. But comments for you with playing Hanif, because I know this was your third consecutive final playing him, I believe, if memory serves me correctly. So
The fifth one, actually.
The fifth one.
Yeah.
See, you told me that yesterday, and I still didn't even retain it in my mind. It's your fifth time playing him, and obviously 3 of those 5 you've been victorious. What would you say about Hanif and how he is as an opponent?
Well, first of all, I think that it's really important to acknowledge the fact that Hanif has played at every national championship since its inception. Okay, we're talking 30 years, bro. This man has been involved in boccia for a very long time, and he loves the sport. From 30 years ago to today, his passion for the game has never wavered. So let's honor that for a moment. But also, I think that it's important to recognize that the game is evolving, and the strategies are getting more and more complex because athletes are adapting to different types of equipment. Keep in mind, Brock, we have what, 8 manufacturers of bocce balls? How many manufacturers of bocce balls did they have when you started? I can tell you when I started, there was only one. So the game itself, the equipment, everything is evolving and it's changing. So I think that although Hanif loves the game, he's struggling a little bit as the game evolves. But I know that he will be there every single year with the same huge smile on his face because he loves the game that much. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for him.
Yeah, I mean, just to answer your question, when I started, I think there was 2. There was the Portuguese balls, and then there was Handy Life, and that was it. That was all there was, and then now there's a lot more than that. And I also have a lot of admiration for Hanif. We competed at the Paralympics together. We've competed at World Championships, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. His passion for the game has never wavered. You just told me something that I did not know, and I've known Hanif for all these years. I did not know that he'd been at national championships since his inception. And to me, if that doesn't warrant an award. If anybody at Bocce Canada is listening to this interview, if that doesn't warrant an award once he leaves the game at national championships, I'm not sure what else would. So that's something to think about. But yes, Hanif is Mr. Consistent, and I agree. I think that his game is, because he's been so successful so long in keeping the game simple, and I mean absolutely zero disrespect when I say that he keeps the game simple. He was very successful at it for a very long time, but I think it's becoming at a level that's too intricate, that he's just not able to follow beyond that 30 years later. And so for me, that's a credit too. I mean, I was at provincial championships last summer, Lance, and I was doing the broadcasting, and I said a few times on the feed, I could not compete in these categories anymore, because I very much was like, I like my handy life bocce balls, and that's it. And then we've gone past just simply handy life bocce balls, and because of that, that's where I just say, no, I'm comfortable where I am, and I'm happy where things are. So the game has certainly evolved over 30 years.
And an example of that, if people are looking for an example of how the game has evolved, I put a short clip out on YouTube just recently and called it 2D Magic because I made one shot at the championships this year where it just did this crazy bounce up and over, and it was an incredible shot against Lisa in the semifinal, actually, and it was the absolute turning point of that match. So 2D balls, the suede covered bocce balls, they are really dynamic, and they're really changing how the game is played.
Yeah, for sure. And I've seen that video, and I know exactly what you're talking about. So do check that out on YouTube, and I hope that you do more of these types of videos, because I think it's important that we see the difference in the change of the game. You've made Team Canada again post Paralympics, and I always knew I made the team 2 years post Paralympics twice, and I always had a concern of there being a letdown. And you come off the high of the Paralympic Games, and sort of year one of a 4-year cycle is sort of up in the air. Are you concerned, no matter what the team does or doesn't do, that there'll be a bit of a letdown this year, just simply based on it being post Paralympic Games?
You know what? I think that I'm excited because this team that's coming together now in this next quadrennial has some new blood in it, I believe, coming up, and I think that that's good. I think that we do need to have some depth on the team, and I think that we're going to see some different combinations. I also think that we're going to see some familiar faces that continue to develop at the international level, which is, it's all about balance, Brock. I'm really excited to continue the journey with Danik and Kristen. I think that we did some great things over the last 4 years leading up to Paris, and I want the opportunity to continue that. But I also want to have the opportunity for others to really push our team to that next level as well. So it's an opportunity to have kind of best of both worlds, a little bit of new blood with some consistent faces on the team. So I'm excited for 2025.
Yeah, I'll be honest, and we've spoke about this multiple times on the program, whether it's with Lance or with others, or just in different stories that I've told over the course of the time that I've been doing the neutral zone. My father is still coaching, and I keep asking him, "Are we done yet?" And he was not so sure what he was doing post Paris. I think there was a bit of a questioning period for him and for the organization and the athletes alike. But I think, Lance, it speaks to what you talk about. It's the belief in the program, belief in the athletes, belief in the new blood, belief in the old blood that makes you all just decide, you know what, let's give this one more crack. And I'm not saying one more crack for sure, but another crack with a 4-year cycle, because LA sounds like a pretty good destination for a Paralympic Games, if you ask me.
Agree, and I wouldn't mind being the third-time Paralympian and heading to LA. It would be quite the story to be a 3-time Paralympian.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Well,
Right.
to bring it back a little bit to nationals, and I'll end here because your wife Danielle is or was your sport assistant for the national championships, and she does do a lot of your national events, if not all of them. How do you guys keep your relationship separate from sports, and how do you find that good balance?
Well, I'll tell you, it takes a lot of people around us to make it work. Danielle does not. I'll be honest with you. She attends tournaments with me when she has to, but she would much rather that I have another sport assistant around to help with that, because physically it's becoming very demanding on her. So we have recognized that the last nationals should be her final one as sport assistant, and that's what I'm hoping to achieve moving forward. However, that being said, we've always had a good, solid relationship, and she understands how important this game is to me. She knows that it is really my escape from the everyday, 9-to-5 job and all the responsibilities. I love my time on the bocce court, but she allows me to go to these tournaments uh, with the understanding that essentially we need other people around us. I have other sport assistants that actually practice with me on a regular basis, so she doesn't actually have to attend every hour of practice. I think that would be too much to ask. And, I'm always looking to find somebody else to kind of fill the shoes in and take over as sport assistant. Because really, I want her to be my wife first, and I honestly don't want her to have to be sport assistant. But thankfully, she loves me and she's willing to stick by me. And she knew when I started this that I was going to go in full force. So I'm just grateful that she's continued to be supportive. She also loves all the people around the game. Uh, she misses your dad when she doesn't see him, so we all have a sense of family around this game, and Danielle has definitely enjoyed that, I think.
The truth of the matter is, Lance, is that when my wife, who's been mentioned on this program, not by name because I'm not sure that she wants to be publicly known, but my wife in Newfoundland, when we went to St. John's, she was the reason why I came back, because she said I would like to experience, a little bit of your travel, and it was probably one of the worst travels on an airplane that I could have picked, to be perfectly honest, with the delays and all that sort of thing. And she experienced it, and we kind of came to the understanding too that, like, we want a marriage, we want ourselves, and I had been to 2 Paralympic Games, many World Championships, and when I went to that regional, when I made the lovely decision to try to come back, and I really struggled, she said, I love you dearly, but I'm not doing this anymore. If you want to do this, you got to go find somebody else. And I think that's the challenge that exists with sport assistants in our sport, because we require so much need and so much help and support. You can kind of mix those lines very easily and very quickly, which can be dangerous for your personal life and your personal relationships. And so I personally love Danielle. I love your wife. She has still kept in contact with me over the course of time. But I learned, Lance, very quickly that I wanted to be involved in the game, but I didn't want to do the game anymore. So when OCPSA or National Championship says to me, do you want to do the stream, or do you want to do this or that or what have you, that's my getaway to come back and see everybody and say, this is what satisfies me. It's no longer the game. And I've always told people, when you're done, you'll know and it'll come to you and you'll understand. And for you, you're just kind of coming back into it and saying, I still want to do this. But you're also recognizing I can't necessarily do it with my wife anymore.
That's right. My wife's health is my priority, and I know that if I'm going to continue, especially at the level that I want to continue at, which is, the international level, I need another sport assistant who is able to support me through that, because it doesn't work otherwise.
Yeah, 100% agree. Lance, thank you so much for spending some time with me and getting a chance to kind of go back a little bit on memory lane on all these times. And congratulations on your success. I'm very happy for you. And I'll say this publicly: I'm very glad I don't have to play you anymore on the court, because you are far better than I am ever now and probably in the future. So congratulations on all your success.
The Neutral Zone is sponsored by the Ontario Para Network. Their focus on the growth and development of wheelchair basketball, tennis, and rugby in Ontario.
So one of my many favorite things about doing the Neutral Zone is that we really work as a collective unit, as a group. We contact each other, we share contacts. I can send an email and say, I need a guest for A, B, and C week. Does anybody have any ideas? And more often than not, somebody comes to me and says, I can get A, B, or C person. And that happened last week with Katie Mitchell. Unfortunately, she was unable to join us at the time of the recording, but I had the pleasure of doing the interview. But as I mentioned at the top of the show, there was so much to chat about. And one of the things I said to Katie was that I really appreciated now her second interview. And the reason we have her is because of Claire's involvement with the women's para ice hockey program. And she works there as the head therapist. And there was a lot of good stuff to chat about. But I want to get your thoughts from both of you before we delve into the specifics of the interview. Just generally, what were your thoughts on the interview? Let's start with Claire and move straight over to Josh.
I missed this interview. It was a treat listening to it after the fact. And Katie is just a wealth of knowledge in her field. She has the accolades to back it up, but she's so personable in her role. And I think that's something that you would hear from anyone that she's been in connection with, whether it's the women's team or Sledge Team Ontario at one point. She came into the sport wanting to learn as much as possible, and she's a big part of the women's national team and is pushing for more research and documentation on concussions and in parasport. And it's just, it's cool to know someone like that. And we are very lucky to have her in the parasport world, because like I said, there's so much you can learn from her.
I totally agree with you. I always find it interesting when Katie comes on to talk to us. She's always got some new piece of information or insight that she can share, and it's always very informative and very interesting for me to listen to. The thing that I took away from it was in regards to your discussion about the Guardian caps that are becoming useful, so to speak, in the NFL and possibly CFL and other leagues, and just her assertion, and I believe she said it was her own opinion, but based on research, that the Guardian caps really don't accomplish what they are purported to do. which is quite fascinating to me because I was always led to believe that the reason that there was a push to have these things added to these leagues was because they reduced the amount of concussions. But as you both pointed out in the interview, the concussion is actually the movement of the brain inside the cranium. It has nothing to do with the protective device on top of the cranium. So that to me was quite an insight and found it rather fascinating.
Yeah, one of the things for me that I will get into a little bit more discussion on Guardian caps, because the Pittsburgh Steelers had a plethora of injuries in this weekend's playoff game, including one concussion by one of their athletes who was wearing a Guardian cap at the time, and he just fell the wrong way and basically fell on his head, and it just really didn't seem to help him all that much. But we'll get into that in a little bit. One of the things that I took away from this interview was just the fact that it's important to be open and honest about your injury. If you're not open and honest about your injury, particularly with concussions and things like that, you're really in trouble. But the thing that I kind of tried to pull away from that was, is it more important to be more transparent if you're a person with a disability or an athlete with a disability because of the variations of your own disability, and that if you have chronic headaches because of your disability, you may want to let them know, and it may not have to do with the fact that you had a concussion. You may not be able to use that as your pinpoint of like, oh, you're having a migraine when it's connected to your disability. So there was a whole bunch there that I just thought. Thoughts from both of you, and we'll start with Josh this time. What do you think about just the idea of, first of all, being open and honest about your situation, but then on top of that, being open and honest when you are an athlete with a disability?
I honestly think it's critical. I mean, if you can't be honest and open with your healthcare practitioners, then I don't know why you're going to them, quite frankly. And particularly when you have a disability, I can think of numerous instances where I've had to be open and honest with my healthcare practitioners and just explain to them, no, I know you think this is nothing, but here's why it's something. And a lot of times, because some medical practitioners do not have experience with disability, they kind of have their eyes open and go, oh, okay, well, now I understand why you're concerned about this. Let's take this not more seriously, but let's look into this further than we normally would. And when you're an athlete with a disability, I think, again, that is very, very important, because your normal might be someone else's concussed.
Yeah, that's exactly it. You put it really well in talking about the your medical staff that you're going to. It's, yes, you have to be very clear about what you're going through to get that information across, but it's also a learning experience for that medical practitioner. Possibly it's Katie, for example, we're talking about her coming into the paraspace. She's an able-bodied woman. And so, yeah, she has the education and the background in that regard, but she came in with minimal lived experience with connecting and hearing stories and situations of people with disabled bodies. And so it's a good two-way street, if you look at it, of information of, hey, I need to be very clear about what I'm experiencing and my symptoms, but also this might be a new experience for this practitioner as well, is that they might not have come in contact with that specific disability. And I can, like, speaking from my personal experience, one of my first interactions with Katie was when she was with Team Sledge Ontario, and I was having migraines, a lot of them, and it turned out to be stress related. But throughout the years, that's been kind of a base point for everything else that has happened. All of the concussions that I've had, or putting a strength programs to strengthen my neck and my shoulders so that those things come into play as well. It's just an ever evolving conversation. And I think you said it really well, Josh, of how important it is to have that conversation with them, because both of you are going to benefit from it.
Speaking of stress, Claire, and I know you've had multiple concussions. I don't know if I have the confidence to put my finger on the exact number that you've had, but I know you've had multiple. Is there that moment of stress where you're like, oh man, I just had, what most would consider significant, head impact in one way or another? Is there that moment when you're skating over to the bench and you're just like, oh, we're going to have that discussion, which then leads into that stress that you just spoke about?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the reality of it. Once you have one concussion, it's part of the conversation every time you're having a symptom that even a little bit mimics a concussion. And it's not only like we have been talking about, it's not just Katie being on the side of caution for it, but I have to start putting myself in that mind frame of being cautious as well. So it does add a little more of stress to have to continue to talk about it, but it's not going to be a good thing for my health and my brain health if I don't keep talking about it.
Yeah, it's really a tough thing. I think, we all can kind of get into the the mode of sports, and you're kind of in rhythm in a game, and you're going and things are feeling good and it's all happening. Maybe you scored a goal or made a good defensive play, or you saved a goal or whatever, and something can really derail you, Josh, where it's kind of like, oh man, we have to have this discussion. But it is really truly important to be honest about the situation and do it for the betterment of your future self rather than the person in the moment.
Oh, absolutely. In the moment, of course, you want to continue playing, or you want to stay in that game or in that event that you're in, but you kind of have to take yourself out of it almost and say, okay, yes, I want to be here and I want to stay in this game, but what are the ramifications if I do that? And certainly, as someone who is, I think, only had a minor exposure to concussion, I wouldn't want it for my worst enemy. It's not fun at all. I still remember the play it happened on, and there was a second play as a goaltender where something happened, and it could have happened again, but one in particular. And you kind of have to just say to yourself, okay, yes, I want to play the game, but my health is more important.
And it is that moment of understanding your future self and realizing what you might be in for. I mean, I told her during the interview that I suffered a concussion that had nothing to do with sport, and it sidelined me for a couple of months, and it was deemed a minor concussion. I don't want to know what a severe concussion would be like then. If that was deemed a minor concussion, and just for context, I was in a transferring lift, which lifted me up about 6.5 feet into the air, and it wasn't connected properly, and I then fell out of the lift onto hardwood floor, and that's how it happened. And it, I mean, this was deemed as a minor concussion, and I was nauseated, I was vomiting, I was dizzy, I was all those things, and I'm just thinking, what would a major concussion be like if that's what a minor one did? And that sidelined me for quite some time. And so I think it really is important to understand what a concussion is and understand the importance of your future and what you might be impacting, not only in the moment, but moving forward 10, 15, 20 years down the line. One of the other things that came out of this conversation was the fact that she had conducted research, and some other people as well, and she'd gone to some seminars, and normally in the seminars we kind of lump in concussions into one lane, and that a concussion is a concussion. But now over time, we're talking about para sports being separated from, conventional concussions, and that has to do, being taken into effect, is disability and all those things. What for you guys, and we'll start with Claire on this one, what for you guys does that sort of research accomplish? Now we're not necessarily talking about a concussion is a concussion. We're talking about a concussion being a concussion, but also different for a person with a disability. So how does that impact the parasports world now moving forward, that we're having these separated conversations?
Well, I think it sends a big message of everyone's starting point from when they have a concussion or from when they aren't experiencing symptoms is different for everybody. And I think that not only the research, but people like Katie specifically really does a good job of individualizing each situation. My concussion recovery is going to look very different from the next person, even if it happened the exact same way and we're experiencing the exact same symptoms. It's not a cookie cutter thing. I think that is what we're really seeing, and that's being shared is, yes, it's a brain injury, yes, but it's very different across the board, and especially with people with disability, because you really have to think outside the box of how are we going to test this baseline and keep it consistent as well, because you take into factors of balance and vision and all these things that just are regular day-to-day symptoms and realities for some people. So that's I think the biggest message is we're getting away from this cookie cutter message around concussions.
Yeah, I don't honestly have a lot to add to that. It comes down to we're realizing that no two brains are the same, just like no two people are the same. And I mean, to me, that's kind of a duh kind of statement, but it's the truth. Like we talk all the time about how no two people are the same. Well, then how can two brains getting a concussion be the same? They can't be. And when you add to it a disability where perhaps a brain didn't get created the same way, didn't form the same way, had different trauma to it during different parts of its development, you can't assume that that brain is going to be the same. So I think research like this is very important, and I'm glad that there are people that are doing that research and showing this.
Especially too, Claire, if you're somebody like Katie who is now recently coming into the para scene, it sounds to me like before we were looking at head injuries the same way, and then people were going into para sports situations and treating it the exact same way, and we've learned no, this is not the way it can be. And she mentioned that this is the first of its kind where we actually went off into its own seminar where we're talking about concussions. And I think for me, that's where, like you pointed out a little bit ago, that's where we're getting away from that cookie cutter situation, because you can't just put everybody in the same room and talk about a concussion as a blanket statement. It's just not possible.
Oh yeah, you couldn't have said it better. It's impossible, and you're not going to get the correct information if you think that way. You're just not researching and listening to lived experience the right way if that's the conclusions you're coming to. So it's really nice to see more conversation around it, and in turn more research and actually documented information, because we've seen over the years how the conversation around concussions in general has changed, but now we're having these more concrete, deeper conversations into just how to treat the athlete itself, and not not the injury, but treat the athlete. And I think that's just going to keep athletes safer and recover better. I took 9 months to recover from my last concussion. It's you have weekends where you feel great and you're ready to go and get back into it 100%, and then you're right back to the starting point. And it's you have to really listen to your body. And yeah, I know I could babble on about this all day long just because from my lived experience. And I'm so grateful for people like Katie, because it's so much needed. It's got to be now where we're investing in stuff like this.
Well, and I think it's fair to say that knowing that there is research specifically about parasports, it legitimizes everything. It makes you feel like, okay, we are a valued community.
In that we're not in the situation where it's like, oh, here we are in this one box again, and that's where it is. And I think you bring up a good point, Josh, in that it validates the fact that you can't just put us in a box, and we get put in a box all through our life. We don't need to be put in every single box that doesn't always fit. So,
well, even in this room that we have proverbially here, we have two people with the same disability, but our disabilities have reacted to us very differently. And same with yours. What's going to work for you, Brock, is not going to work for Claire. And what works for Claire, even though she has the same disability I do, is not going to work for me because hers has affected her differently. So it's great to see that we have these changes coming.
Just for understanding, for cerebral palsy, and I'm sure other disabilities are much the same. There are dozens and dozens of people that have disabilities, and there are dozens and dozens of different diagnoses in the way that it is, but it's the same disability, but it's called something different. Like mine is called something big and long, which I know, but I won't bore the audience with the big long name. But my diagnosis can look very differently than somebody who has that, but it's affected a different part of the brain. Like it's such a spectrum. Like you can go from one person who can walk, with a little bit of a limp, and another person who's wheelchair bound. It all depends on how the brain is affected and where the brain is affected. That can make a lot of the difference. So it's a good point you bring up there. Claire, you've mentioned it a few times, and I knew based on this conversation you were going to mention it, hence why we're bringing up this next portion of the conversation. During my conversation with Katie, she mentioned a lot of the time when it comes to injuries, whether concussion or whether otherwise, she has to be the bearer of bad news, and she doesn't like it. But she often has to tell people, your day is done, your month is done, your whatever the time frame is that you have for the injury is done. Can you walk us through as lived experience of what that's like? Like what's Katie's demeanor like when she has to come over to you and say, I'm just using you as the example, Claire, your day is done because of this injury. How does she approach that? Because to me, I think it's done a certain way, but I want you to tell us in lived experience.
Yeah. So even before delivering that kind of news, if you know Katie, you know that she's not just there to do the job. She's there because she cares about every athlete. She knows their life and what's going on, and that plays an important role in diagnosing and all that stuff. It all plays in, and she gets it. And she's just also a very cool person. Like she wants to hang out and be there, and the feeling is mutual. So it's when Katie is in a space like the women's team and we just have that shared love for each other, it's you trust that conversation. It sucks to get that news, but I mean, at the same time, if you're feeling that kind of way and the symptoms that you're feeling, your time's kind of done for the day anyway. You should, at least. So I don't think it ever comes as a surprise when we're talking about kind of a concussion. Yes, you might get some different reactions if we're talking like a shoulder injury or something else that like a player is going to try to push through, quote unquote. But she leads with professionalism, but she's also just a very enjoyable person to be around. So and she does a really good job in the recovery process of letting you lead your recovery in a sense of she's going to give you the tools to recover and cope and give you all the resources. But it's really you, the athlete, that is doing these things and listening to your body at the same time. Because it's, especially with concussions, you're going to have moments where in a split second, something felt really, really good. And now you're back to the starting point. So she does a really good job of not dragging you along. Like, hey, this is your journey and you got to let me know how you're feeling. And I will adjust what I'm suggesting to you according to that.
Josh, one of the things we spoke about in the mainstream sports world was, of course, Tua Tagovailoa, who was told by Mike McDaniels after his recent concussion for this year that he should be the quarterback to his life and not necessarily focus on football. And I told Katie that specifically, and she told me that she hadn't heard that, but she liked it. Your thoughts on what she said regarding Tua's concussion and the fact that she also then shared that she wasn't surprised that he sustained a subsequent injury, albeit different, but he did sustain another injury. Your thoughts on what she had to say regarding Tua for the second time since we've had her on the program?
Well, I think the first thing that we should make note of is that we are referring to this situation as this year's concussion. Like that in itself is jarring. Like that, the conversation should never be, oh yeah, so this year's concussion, because there shouldn't be. Well, there are, but there shouldn't have to be multiple concussions. And it shouldn't be not so glib, I guess is not the word I'm looking for, but it's just kind of interesting that it's like, oh yeah, so this year's concussion. But to get to the point of your question there, I mean, I think all of us have watched the concussion against the Buffalo Bills, and I think this year's concussion was actually against Buffalo as well. If I remember correctly, he ran into Damar Hamlin face first, which still boggles my mind. But I think at some point you have to have that conversation and you have to really sit that athlete down and you have to make sure that it's sunk into them. Like, I am telling you that this head injury could impact the rest of your life. We're not just talking about getting you back on a football field, but you could be affected in your day-to-day life by this long term, not just while you're recovering from this, but this could end up creating a new normal for you. And are you willing to put that risk out there? And I mean, we've seen that, yes, he was. And I've made no secret in the past about how I feel about the situation. I think that this could have been the one that causes him to retire. But once again, I'm not correct. And I'm a little scared by that because I know he is a father. I know he is a husband. He's a brother. He's a lot of things to a lot of people other than just Tua, the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins. And so I really, really, really hope that one of these days he finally, for lack of a better expression, comes to his senses and says, football isn't worth what I'm putting myself through. Because I can't imagine, with the concussions he's had, that he's not affected day to day. I just don't believe it. I really don't. And I mean, I as I've said before in this discussion, I believe I've come close to a concussion. I don't believe I've actually had one, but I had to sit out 2/3 of a hockey game because I wasn't feeling right after taking a hit. I can't imagine what having multiple diagnosed concussions feels like. And I worry about him as a person. Like, yes, I'm a Miami Dolphins fan and I love seeing him on the field. But when I'm watching a game and I'm going, slide, 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 that's not good. You shouldn't have to be told how to react during a play.
When you send me a message yesterday, and there's no secrets of where my loyalties lie, but when you send me a message yesterday and you said, quote, "I'm glad your quarterback knows how to slide," and we're talking about Josh Allen, and my response to you is, yeah, me too, because I have seen your quarterback in this year's concussion. I've seen your quarterback slide directly into another player with his hand, and I go, "Oh boy, this is not good." Like it's
just shocking.
Yeah, and then I remember thinking to myself, and I'm again in no way trying to make light of to his situation, but I remember thinking to myself in that moment. I remember thinking, "Geez, Sean McDermott, you better be going over to Josh Allen, putting your hand on his shoulder, and saying, 'Don't do that,' because that's the example of what you shouldn't do." I don't know this for certain, and maybe either of you might have a better idea than I, but there's such a profession out there, or professions that are listed as mandated reporters, which means that if somebody's doing something they shouldn't, or to another person, what have you, they are obligated to report it to authorities or people in more power to do higher things that is not in their grasp, but it's in other grasp. So I'm thinking of doctors. I'm thinking of people that work with children. I'm thinking of people in all kinds of different scenarios. To me, I didn't get a chance to ask Katie, but I would be surprised if a therapist is not in that mode of being a mandated reporter, which leads me to think, I can't believe that the therapist didn't say, "You cannot play football, period, full stop." And somebody had to give the rubber stamp, Claire, to say, "Go ahead and go back." Does the mandated reporter just go, "You're back to your normal health and you can go play football," or do you think it goes beyond that?
To be honest, what I've seen across the NFL over the last few years, it seems like that's you check off, you've not played in 2 weeks and you're allowed to come back. I think you said it very well. It seems like there isn't a whole lot of deep conversation going on in terms of how long someone should actually be sitting out, or if they should not be playing at all anymore. And it's scary to think that there's athletes out there that are possibly thinking about, well, what about the next one? Well, are we going to have a next year's concussion? Like, that's why are we sports? I love sports. Don't get me wrong. Love it. My entire life revolves around it, but it's not as important as what we're talking about right here. It's not. It's not.
No, absolutely not. And you talk about mandatory reporting, Brock, and I would just point you back to either his first or his second diagnosed concussion when he had 2 in 1 season. Like, 1 in 1 season should have been enough to shut him down. But then they allowed him to come back claiming it was a shoulder or a neck injury, not a concussion. And he got another one. And as Katie pointed out in your interview, every sports fan now can identify a fencing response. That never used to be a thing in our fandom. We never used to be able to look and go, "Oh yeah, that was a concussion." But now, whether it's current day or especially, I look back at some of these hockey and football reels and things that come up on social media of the good old days of sports. And I just look and I go, how are these people alive? So I don't think mandatory reporting exists or is policed, quite frankly.
For sure. I would agree with that assessment, but I would also say that in other situations with mandating reporting, I think there's that moment of thinking, is my career going to be on the line if I do A, B, and C? Going to school, I had a scenario where my educational assistant had to report something that was going on, but she said, quote, if this gets out, I'm going to lose my job, but I'm a mandated reporter. And it's like, you're a mandated reporter, but you still have that moment of, I'm going to lose my job if I do this, but that's not what you sign in being a mandated reporter. You are mandated to report something, period, full stop, with the protection, we hope, of your job. But clearly people don't necessarily feel that way, and that my job is more important than my reporting. When I look at it the other way around, and I think your reporting is more important than your job, but that's just me coming at this from a different lens. We only have a couple of minutes, so I just want to get quick thoughts. Quick thoughts on the divisional round for the NFL game that you highlighted, liked, disliked. What do we think? Let's start with Josh on this one.
Couple of quick thoughts. I thought the games on Saturday, the Ravens versus the Steelers, great game. Not surprised by the result, although I'm surprised by how much of a difference there was. I really expected Pittsburgh to put up a better game than they did. But as you point out, they did suffer a number of injuries during that game. One in particular, I remember, to TJ Watt, to his arm. And he did go back in that game, but you have to think that that was weighing on his mind, or at least his body was maybe not reacting the way it normally would because of that injury. Houston, I think, was another one. I didn't really know who was going to win that game, but I was not expecting Houston to be in as much control as they were. The Sunday games, I was a bit surprised that Green Bay didn't move on. I thought maybe they would, but I think, again, they also suffered some injuries yesterday, which may have affected their ability. But good on Philadelphia for getting where they got to. Congratulations, Buffalo. That was a dominating performance. I know I texted Brock partway through that game and said, so do you take your starters out now or do you leave them in? Because they were in that much control. And lastly, I'm really kind of happy about Washington, seeing them move on with Jaden Daniels. That franchise has been in the mire so long that it's nice to see them actually succeeding and getting further along the playoffs. And of course, as we record here, there's still one game left to go, and so we'll see how Minnesota does.
Yes, my dad has been a Washington fan my entire life. And so to watch that game, they called it the doink for the divisional.
Yes.
What a game. That was exciting to watch.
It was.
Yes, we all anticipated the Bills kind of owning that game. But I'm really looking forward to watching tonight's game. And yes, I think the Vikings are going to win tonight. But yeah, I'm excited. It's the playoffs, and yes, my Packers are not in it anymore. Sorry. But yes, I guess I have to jump on a bandwagon for the rest of the playoffs.
The Bills are taking anybody, so yeah.
Yeah, of course they are.
Yeah, it was a good opening round. I can't say much more than what you guys said. I will just say that I am very satisfied that the Buffalo Bills won that game. I was very concerned after that first play when the long bomb went and we're down 7-0, and it was like, oh, what's about to happen here? I'm not sure, but we survived. Just to give you a clearer picture of the next round, we know we have the Titans versus the Chiefs, which I think we can all determine what the result might be there.
Sorry,
the
Titans?
Commanders.
You mean Texans?
Texans, excuse me. I'm looking at it too, and I read it wrong. The
okay.
Houston Texans and the Kansas City Chiefs, the Commanders versus the Lions, and then the Eagles are still waiting for their opponent, which will be determined this week still, and then the Bills play the Ravens. So lots of good matchups for you to sink your teeth in, beginning on Saturday this week, and then concluding on Sunday as per usual. That's always a great show for us as we close out today. We thank you for another loyal listen to our program, and I'd like to thank Josh Watson, Claire Buchanan. I'd also like to thank our technical producer, Mark Aflalo. Stay tuned for next week because you just never know what happens when you enter the neutral zone. Be safe, be well.
The Neutral Zone is brought to you by the Ontario Para Network. Connect with them at ON Para Network. Follow them online at onpara.ca. Now that's a winning combination.